Hello, my name is Gloria Kendi Brona. I'm a PhD student at the UBC Faculty of Forestry. My research is about indigenous knowledge systems and their integration into the management of forest ecosystems. In this section, we are going to talk about the cultural values of forests. We've mainly been focusing about the material aspects of forest, but now we are going to shift and move beyond the material values to the intangible and cultural values of forest. Talking about cultural heritage, how do communities interact with their forest resources and forested landscapes? Local communities and indigenous people all over the world have had their cultural infrastructures weakened by the forces of colonialism, neocolonialism, globalization, and introduced religions. But somehow you find communities that have still carried on their cultural traditions to the present day. And that is what we refer to as cultural heritage. And to me, cultural heritage is a basic need because it offers a symbolic necessity that gives meaning to the lives of communities, connecting the past, the present, and the future. It's about the life of the people. It's ingrained in their lifestyles and the way they relate to resources. In terms of resource relationship to resources, one of these knowledge systems is known as traditional ecological knowledge. And this is the knowledge and insights acquired by communities through extensive observations of natural phenomena and intricate and intimate relationships with natural resources. And you find that these kinds of knowledge systems have protected sacred sites and key ecosystems around the world through the application of these kinds of knowledge systems. But until very recently, most of these kinds of knowledge systems or community knowledge systems have been dismissed as superstitions, beliefs, irrational behaviors, because it's mainly embedded in ritual and myth, and most of it is transmitted through oral traditions from one generation to the other. But if we look at the international discourse, what is the world talking about? How are these kinds of knowledge systems positioned in global international discourse? If we go back to the 1987 Brundtland Commission, all through to the Rio Summit in 1992, the UNESCO Conventions of 2005, Diversity of Cultural Expressions, and the 2003 Convention on Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage, all the way to Rio +20 in 2012. You see now that these kinds of knowledge systems are being given prominence. These kinds of discussions are featuring in the global discussions, that the recognition of communities as repositories of vast accumulations of knowledge within in different parts of the world. And the loss of these knowledge systems is now considered as a loss for humanity. And there's a general agreement that we really can learn from their skills in sustaining very complex ecological systems. And this is especially in the face of serious global environmental challenges. We're talking about climate change, we're talking about loss of biodiversity, we are talking about desertification, and so on. So now let's look at some examples of places where communities have retained a very close relationship with their environmental resources of forests or trees. The picture that you're looking at is the mugumo tree or the strangler fig, known as the strangler fig, I think, as you can see from the tree, because it takes over other tree species that it grows on. And this is a sacred tree among the Gikuyu people of central Kenya. This is considered to be a holy tree, a tree of God. This is not a tree that is cut for either firewood or construction or any other use. It's the tree under which rituals and sacrifices are performed. If you investigate further, you see that the connection of the root systems of this tree and there's a connection between the fig tree root systems and the underground water reservoirs. In most places where you find these trees, you'll find streams. Therefore, the reverence that communities have for these kinds of trees have helped to preserve the streams, held the soil together, and helped to reduce soil erosion, as well as landslides. So these kinds of cultural beliefs, spiritual practices contribute to the conservation of biodiversity and community livelihoods. Another example from India, the banyan tree. Interestingly, another strangler fig. As you can see in the picture, the image, the women are winding threads around the tree. And this is a tradition that is backed by Hindu beliefs, in which the tying of the ropes or the thread around the trees, they pray for the health of their husbands and good health of their marriages. Therefore, again, if you look at the tree itself, it's an intricate ecosystem on its own. So these cultural traditions safeguard critical ecosystems. The most recent discovery in the treatment of malaria comes from traditional Chinese medicine in the plant that you see in the image. Malaria is a disease that is spread through the bite of a mosquito, and it's a disease that is estimated to kill one person every 30 seconds. Now let's think of that statistics. Every 30 seconds, one person is gone. So you can understand why malaria features in Millennium Development Goal number 6. Were it not for the practice of this traditional Chinese medicine, carrying on these traditions from time to time through generations, we would not be talking about a breakthrough, scientific breakthrough in the world of medicine, solving critical global health challenges. Another example comes from Uganda, from the Baganda Kingdom, where the community extracts bark cloth from the mutuba tree, as you can see in the picture here. This is a tradition that predates weaving, and once the bark is extracted from the tree, it's then pounded using different kinds of hammers, and then it's used in coronation ceremonies, healing ceremonies, and it's really one of the visible symbols of the Baganda nation. Once the bark is extracted, then they would wrap the trunk with banana fiber and banana leaves, and then the bark will regenerate. That's the kinds of knowledge systems about resource management that we are talking about. So resource management and environmental conservation is moving towards an integrated landscape approach or landscape approach to conservation. This means conservation with a human face, looking at landscapes not as just pristine wildernesses, but places that communities have inhabited, and for generations, some of them traditional territories of communities that have been expelled, so that these protected areas and forest landscapes can be created. So if we are talking about integration of communities in the management of landscapes, then the aspect of traditional ecological knowledge, indigenous knowledge systems comes to the fore, because these are key the communities become key stakeholders in the management of these resources. Let's just take a moment to reflect on this example from the Mount Kenya National Forest and National Park in Kenya, central Kenya. And this is a Man and Biosphere Reserve as well as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The last time when I visited this forest, I met this gentleman in the picture, and he was our tour guide. His name was Munene, Munene. And Munene, as we walked around the forest, he turned to me and said, "Do you know, if it were not for Wangari Maathai, this forest would not be here, and I would not have this job. I don't know what I would be doing." That's simple, but profound. Wangari Maathai is a Kenyan scholar, environmentalist, conservationist, and truly one of the great daughters of Africa. Through her efforts with working with communities, she has seen the safeguarding of key forested ecosystems and landscapes in the Kenyan context, which won her the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004. So Munene's job as a tour guide involves taking around tourists, researchers, school groups around the forest, and that requires you to have an intricate knowledge of the ecosystem, traditional ecological knowledge. You need to know the plant species, what their uses are, plants, animals, what's the relationship between plants and animals, and so on. Biodiversity does not thrive in plantation forest. You can see the difference between the two pictures. Look at the indigenous forest and look at the plantation forest. Clear. In the plantation forest, there is no undergrowth. Therefore, you will not have much going on. So, is culture then the missing link to development that is truly sustainable? Wangari Maathai, in her book, The Challenge for Africa, writes, and I quote, "Traditional technology and artifacts reflect the creativity inherent within societies. When that sense of creative potential is lost, the innovative part of the brain is left dormant, making it more difficult to think in new pioneering ways. Culture could be the missing link to creativity, productivity, and confidence." And she continues, "Communities should have a right to honor and practice their cultures and make them relevant to today's needs. The challenge for many parts of Africa that were decultured is to discover their cultural heritages and use them to connect with the past and help them direct them in their political, spiritual, economic, and social development. Therefore, cultural heritage should take center stage in development, in forging a way forward. It's important in trying to achieve sustainable development." In Rio +20, the world generally agreed that we are way off course in achieving sustainable development. And that's why we are transitioning from Millennium Development Goals, MDGs, to Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. And the SDGs are putting the environment at the center of international policy and practice. What is the role then of cultural heritage, cultural diversity? How does that fit into the SDGs? Take a look at the SDGs and evaluate how cultural heritage, cultural diversity, traditional ecological knowledge, indigenous knowledge systems can fit into the discussion of sustainable development goals. In conclusion, various international laws and protocols seem to agree that the redesign of development and conservation efforts should start by examining the local constructions to the extent that they are the life and history of a people. This implies a change that comes from communities themselves, having confidence in and deploying their indigenous knowledge to bring about economic and social progress. It's clear that we are facing unprecedented challenges. Since there is no culture that is applicable to all human beings, and none can satisfy all communities, then we need to embrace complexity and diversity of thought in forging a way forward. Traditional ecological knowledge and other knowledge systems embedded within local and indigenous communities might as well hold the key to unlocking a world of possibilities, I believe, and development that is truly sustainable, context-dependent, appropriate for those communities. So we therefore need to engage constructively and honestly with these communities and diverse groups across the world.